Hey, get in, fellas. We're going back to therapy. This is session 49, and we today are going to be honoring, as we continue Heroes Appreciation Month, the boys in blue, the police. My cousin is joining us today, just won this past year Ocean City, Maryland's Police Officer of the Year. We're so proud of cousin Ben and talk to him about what it's like to be a police officer and the mental health toll it takes on the officers, men and women across the country. It's intentional, guys. I know that police in our country right now is a controversial topic, and we want to build empathy and build understanding so we don't go villainizing an entire group. Speaking of entire groups, we're going to start the episode with something that is very specific to police officers, and that's the tough guy myth, about the idea of wearing a mask and not feeling our feelings and how it can impact us and what we can do about it. And then we're going to wrap with a guy who's mostly known for basketball, less known for being a big police advocate, man, the myth, the legend, Shaq, as our BROMotions Hall of Fame inductee. And we'll wrap, as always, with some content recs to take away from the show. All right, let's go. All right, what's up, fellas? This week, we're kicking things off with a topic that I think is super important for all of us to unpack, especially as we're honoring all these heroes this month. And it's something that we're going to call on the show the tough guy myth. You might hear some other people call it the man code and other forms of this unspoken rule book that a lot of guys live by. It says we always have to be strong, always be in control, always have it together. It's like we're expected to suit up with invisible armor every day and just, like power through. No complaints, no weakness, no vulnerability. And think about the messages we get. This starts super young. Man up, suck it up, don't be a baby, shake it off. It starts early and it's reinforced everywhere. Movies, sports, even well-meaning advice from family and friends creates this idea that expressing emotions, especially the negative ones, is a sign of weakness. And that's the tough guy myth in action. But here's the kicker, fellas. It's heavy armor we're asked to wear. It can actually do more harm than good in the long run. Because what happens when we try to bottle everything up? Stress, pain, those tough emotions, they don't just disappear. They accumulate, they build up. In psychological terms, this is often referred to as emotional suppression. It's a coping mechanism where we consciously or unconsciously try to push down or avoid experiencing certain emotions. While it might help in the short term, suppression has its role when we're trying to get shit done. It can have some pretty significant negative consequences if you never unpack that box and let yourself experience and feel your natural reaction to a situation. Think about your own life. Maybe it's at work, you're facing a deadline, your boss is on your ass, and you're feeling overwhelmed. But you put on that tough guy armor, you grind through. Maybe it's in your relationships. You're going through a rough patch with your partner, but you act like everything's fine because you don't want to burden them, as men often do in their relationships. And you put this internal pressure on yourself to always be the fixer, the problem solver for everyone else, even when you're running on empty. Again, that's the tough guy myth in action. But there's this physiologic, biological component to it too. When we subscribe to the tough guy myth and suppress our emotions, our bodies still react. Our heart rate over time increases, our blood pressure rises, we tense our muscles, and over time, chronic emotional suppression leads to physical health problems, headaches, digestive issues, and even cardiovascular disease. We know that chronic stress is a risk factor for heart attacks and strokes. So it's like your body's screaming for attention, even though you're trying to stay silent under that tough guy facade. Even look at sports. I love them. You love them. We celebrate the athletes who play through pain, who never show emotion on the field, the stoic player. They leave it all on the field without a tear, but that takes a huge toll. And in this generation, we're starting to see more athletes speak out about their mental health struggles that come with the pressure of existing in this current world with social media and all the exposure to things that these men and women have. Michael Phelps, Kevin Love, they're starting to reject the tough guy myth, and it's been incredibly powerful to see. Psychologically, subscribing to that tough guy myth can lead to a range of issues, can contribute to increased anxiety and depression, difficulty in relationships, decreased ability to experience positive emotions. And that doesn't even talk about the substance use and the suicide risk that comes from burying stuff like that down. You're cutting yourself off from the full range of human experience, all because you're trying to live up to this unhealthy ideal. How can that be good? how can that be the right way to go about things in today's day and age? Today, we're going to make a point to challenge that myth. We're going to explore what it looks like to start taking off that tough guy armor. We're going to acknowledge that it's okay to feel, it's okay to struggle, it's okay to ask for help. In fact, we know now it's brave, it's a sign of strength, not weakness, because it's harder to do that. It's easy to bottle things up and to just exist feeling like shit. So we want to acknowledge that asking for help when you need it is clearly true bravery. And what we're talking about here, guys, is developing better emotional regulation skills. You can go look back at some CBT and DBT episodes from early on. You can hit me up if you're looking for resources, or of course, this would be a great thing to get into therapy about, because I don't want to confuse you guys. It's not about never feeling negative emotion. It's not about only feeling negative emotion, but rather we need to learn to acknowledge them, experience them in a healthy way, and move through them effectively instead of burying them down like we're so used to doing. Guys, this isn't just in your head anymore. This is stuff that we know impacts you and we know needs to improve for your relationship with yourself, others, and the world around you. Real strength isn't about being emotionless. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable. And I know that's something we can all work on. Up next, we have a really important conversation with my cousin, Ocean City Police Officer of the Year, Ben Panitch, about the challenges faced by our heroes in law enforcement and why prioritizing their mental well-being is so crucial. Y'all, there's no secret that how we feel about police in this country right now is difficult. It has been a challenging few years. The point of this is to humanize police officers for us all. Human beings wear those uniforms, they wear those badges, and I want you to really understand what it's like before you go villainizing such a large group of people. Ben does a great job in this interview talking about that tough guy myth and how it's something that each individual officer has to work on. Stay tuned after the break. It'll be a good interview. Stick around. All right, Ben, as I ask our guests to get us started, do you have a preferred vocal exercise for us? Maybe something the boys at the station do to get hyped before a call?
Shoot, honestly, a lot of it is we call it the OODA loop, so it's mental preparation. So a lot of it isn't verbal, more just in your head of you're thinking of every possible scenario that could happen. So in my head now, I'm thinking, what questions could you ask? What are the potential answers and where I could take it? And as long as it follows one of those paths, then I won't be thrown by anything that puts forward to me.
That's fair, right? So we talk about coping ahead in therapy world. And so that's what my awesome first cousin, shout out Alan, and his sister Sherry, and their youngest of two sons, Ben. And if you're thinking, wait, didn't you already have a cousin Ben on? I did. And like any good Jewish boy, I have cousin Bens on both sides of the family. I think that could be one of the most Jewish things about me. So really want to give a warm welcome to Officer Ben Panitch. Ben grew up in Buffalo Grove, Illinois, which is a northern suburb of Chicago. He went to the University of Maryland, and now he's a dedicated police officer first class down in Ocean City, Maryland. In fact, his commitment and service were so great that he was recognized this year's Ocean City's Officer of the Year. Outside of the badge, Ben has some cool passions that may or may not surprise you. Certainly not if you know him. He's training to be a pilot and has been a big-time skydiver throughout his life. As maybe a bandwagon, since you've been out there, they've been pretty damn good, but bleeds caps reds for the Washington Capitals. So really excited to have you on, Ben, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate being on.
Ben, I know that as young as 10, 11, 12, growing up in a suburban town, you've always wanted to be a police officer. What's the story?
Yeah, the best way I put it is when you go through that phase as a young child, when you want to be, a police officer, firefighter, or military, and, you dress up as a young kid and you go past them on the side of the road and you're like, wow, I wonder what they're doing. I never grew out of that phase.
Yeah.
So for as long as I can remember, I was like, I wonder what those guys are doing on the side of the road. And instead of continuing to wonder, I figured, well, I'm just going to get the answer. I'm just going to go do it. And that's kind of what led me down this path.
That's cool. I mean, I remember as a kid, you did like junior officer stuff in high school. Did you continue that all through?
Police explorer or police cadet, and then ended up being what's called a community service officer, which is, the next step where you're getting paid to do municipal ordinances, things of that nature. And then police officer and dispatcher as well.
Why'd you end up choosing to go to Ocean City? I mean, it's a pretty unique environment. We'll get into some of the things that make it a unique place for sure.
So worked for a suburb of Chicago as a community service officer. Did that for a few years. Wanted more. I mean, I think we always want more. We want to push ourselves and see that next step. And Ocean City was that next step where it's a bigger agency, a lot more calls for service, especially during the summertime. You're able to immerse yourself in more police work, is how I like to put it. Is I want to push myself and ensure that I'm busy and getting new calls for service that I'm not used to. And of course, things can happen anywhere. And my old suburb certainly stays busy in their own way. I just wanted something different, and I wanted to get away from the Chicagoland area. Went to the University of Maryland. And I remember seeing this presentation on the Ocean City Police Department, and it's a presentation that I now actually give as one of our recruiters. And it was
Sure.
for our seasonal police officer program at the time. I was like, I'm not going to do that. Well, 2 years later, sure enough, there I was doing it,
Yeah.
and did that for the summer and ended up getting offered a full time position. Was hesitant at first, ultimately stayed, and here I am now. Shoot, 6 years later.
Yeah, it's awesome, and really, have made it home coming out of school
That's
at
right.
Maryland. So, what, beyond your work as a police officer, what's one surprising interest or thing that people might not know about you?
So, as we talked about, obviously, get my private pilot's license, wanting to continue that all the way to get my commercial, seeing where that takes me. In addition to jumping out of those planes, skydiving was a passion of mine for a while. I got it when I was in college. I got my skydiving certification and my licensing for that, and still try to enjoy it as much as possible. It's hard to sometimes get out to the drop zones, especially with my line of work and scheduling, but it's been a big passion of mine, and a way for me to release a lot of stress too. And people kind of don't understand that. Once you get over the adrenaline side of the sport, for me, it's the most calming thing in the world just to be in the sky by yourself with your thoughts. And you really have to be kind of on top of it, if that makes sense. And it's almost a numbing experience to be able to just be with your thoughts and kind of the moment of being in the air.
I mean, for me, I think it'd be relieving to not die every time you do it. So,
And
of
that's
course, it's
it.
going to be calming after the fact. I've never done it. I know you took Abby, my sister, once upon a time. So, I mean, sure, when I don't think your brain tells you, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And if you don't die, yeah, those are calm moments.
Yes. Yeah. For me, it's really just a serenity of being alone in the sky. The wind is rushing on the side of the helmets, and it's just a smile on my face as I'm looking around, looking at the horizon, and enjoying kind of being a part of the world. You can't
We
you
don't
can't beat that.
we don't use this term lightly on this show, you fucking psycho. All right, so
Yes.
let's get
Yes.
into it. Police work inherently involves emotional challenges, Ben. Could you speak to some of those challenges?
We all know the stressors that police officers face on a daily basis, and it I don't think you really understand it until you do it. We can talk about it, using force and going to scenes where it's traumatic for someone else. We really do absorb a lot of those stressors off these other people and take it on as a burden of ourselves. And it's really, really important that you're able to manage those and understand, this is their problem. I might be here to try and help, but I can't take on the full burden myself. And I certainly can't take it home with me. That's when you start having a lot of problems as a police officer, is when you start taking everything home. You can't kind of leave it right at the door. And that gets really, really challenging because you can't just shut it off. Something happens at work, you want to talk about it, you want to express it to your friends, but to a certain extent, you don't want to because now you're bringing everything home. And it's one of
Mm-hmm.
the few jobs where someone asks you, "Oh, how was your day?" And 9 times out of 10, instead of being, "Oh, I had this meeting or that meeting," it was fine, and you
Yeah.
leave it at that.
It's interesting, Ben, because knowing we were going to talk to you today about the mental health of policing, we chose to start this episode with what we're calling like the tough guy myth. That, like, yes, we are taught to bury these things and taught to push them down. But especially in your line of work, if we don't have an avenue to cope, if we don't have an avenue to process these really difficult things, then
Yeah,
we know physically and mentally it impacts us. So, what do you
absolutely.
and your colleagues do to again help walk that fine line of taking it home, make sure you're getting to let off the right amount of steam?
So for us in Ocean City, we have what's called a peer support unit, and it's a group of police officers that have gone to additional trainings. We're all crisis intervention trained, so we do the foreplay. It's called I am, you are, and you work through it. And I hear, I see, and they get sent to additional trainings because you try doing that on another cop, and you'd be like, dude, I know exactly what you're doing. Stop, I'm fine.
You
So
sound like a therapist, bro.
exactly. So they get sent to additional trainings, and it's more just showing that we're there for each other. It's okay to sit down, and the toughest part is we can't give answers to the problems. The way you handle your call is the way you're going to handle it. I'm going to handle it my way. And I'm not there to critique the way you handled it. I'm just there to make sure that I can listen to what you want to say about how you handled it. So we have that avenue. After all major incidences, we're doing debriefs, which I think is really, really important. And it's something that is newer. And we have a firefighter that actually has his master's in, I believe it's his master's in counseling or psychology, and he runs all these debriefs. And he does therapy sessions outside of work as well. And he's an awesome guy. And he just sits us all down and we talk through the incident. What was your role? What did you do? Why did you do it? What were your thoughts on what other people did? And not only is it good for professional development, because we can figure out, all right, next time we get that similar call, we're going to do it this way. It lets you get it out. Because all of us inherently as humans want to talk about it, but a lot of what we do, we can't talk about freely. Cases that we do, I can't talk about a case until it's adjudicated. And that can sometimes be difficult. You want to talk to family and friends about what's going on. And sometimes you just can't. So within these circles, you can. And being able to just let it out and say, yeah, this sucked. That's okay. And I think it's really important that we're able to do it with each other, because as much as I can sit here and tell you, as a psychologist, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is why I'm thinking it, you will never understand what I've seen, why I have those feelings, because you haven't done it. And it's the same as I can't go to, my mom and talk about it. I can't go to my brother Samuel and talk about it. It's just unique. And being
Bless
able to,
Sherry.
I know. I feel terrible because I think I'm doing just fine. I'm taking years off her life, and that's the worst part. And
Hmm.
that's normal,
Hmm.
unfortunately, in law enforcement as well. And that's its own stressor. But at least
Yeah,
for the
the
calls and things
the
like that,
fear
we're
it
able to,
puts into our loved
yeah,
ones, our significant others, our family. Yeah, I mean, there's so many overlays here to military veterans and fire department officers and stuff. That's why we're kind of bundling all these things together this month. And we talked to a fire department chief the other week, a few weeks ago on the show, and they have a similar process for debriefing tough calls and learning, but also validating and relating with one another. So I'm glad to hear that's made its way into policing, and
yeah.
also not surprised to hear that that's a newer thing.
We're usually behind the eight ball, and that's
Yeah,
it's government work. That's normal.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's tough for the government to try and grasp all these new concepts. And it's also hard because you have to think fiscally speaking for the government. We are paid by taxpayer dollars. If the government admits that the things they send us to are causing us problems, now it costs money to treat us. So they have to be very cognizant of that fine line. If I can't do my job because of what I've seen and, my PTSD and my stress, they still have to pay me. And
yeah.
they have to take that into account as well. That,
Shame. It's a shame, but it sounds exactly like I've worked with a lot of military vets, and one of them was telling me how, like, when you have your exit interview essentially from the military, it is not set up in a way for you to say I had problems with it. Like,
correct.
you really got to overcome the interview itself to make sure you
Yeah.
make a point of the trauma or how it's impacted you, because they try to steer away from it for reasons like you said, man. If you're going to admit that the things we inherently ask police and military to do are going to fuck them up, well, then you need to make sure you've got the guardrails to
Yeah.
keep them healthy and make sure they get treatment. So I hear you, man. I wonder, again, you've got your jumping out of planes and things along those lines as your former coping. You see, guys, how maybe they've got less healthy ways to cope, and what are some of those
Yeah.
things you see?
Absolutely. It's law enforcement. Cops drink, right? We
Yeah,
all know that. And that's certainly a huge coping mechanism for a handful of police officers throughout the nation. And it's
yeah, of
known.
course.
And you'll like this. I'm a big whiskey guy now. Whiskey and IPAs, those are my two things. And I have to be careful that I don't ever associate the things that I enjoy, such as the whiskey and having a nice old fashioned after work, with a bad call for service. So I
Mm-hmm.
make a point of when I have a bad call for service, I often won't have a drink after work.
Mm,
And if it's just a normal shift, then awesome. I'll come home, I'll have a glass of whiskey, my dinner, and I'll be good to go. Because I don't ever want to associate bad call for service with then alcohol. And that,
yeah.
that takes a conscious choice. And if you don't make that conscious choice, you can blur those lines very easily.
Ben, that takes, I mean, it really shows, your self awareness and emotional intelligence, because that's very difficult for people to
Yes.
do, right? The awareness it takes, what's the word, hold yourself accountable,
Yeah.
kind of stuff, right? The accountability to make sure you're not doing that, because you said police officers drink, man. I mean, logically, alcohol is the number one coping mechanism in
Yeah.
America. Take away cigarettes, maybe, hard to say.
Yeah.
So it's really, really cool that you make a point to do that. And I'm sure you see guys struggle otherwise. And just to make a quick joke, if you did not know how old Cousin Officer Ben is, he's 27, as evidenced by, oh, yeah, I'm like a big whiskey guy and IPAs. He hasn't yet learned, as he will in his 30s, that alcohol is the devil. He's
I
not
still
old
put up
enough
with
to have
it.
it treating him as poorly as it will when his
Yes.
genes start to fail him.
Yep. Yep.
We're
I
not
know.
drinkers in the Jewish faith,
No.
Ben. We're not, we're not drinkers. It's going to come for you. I'm curious, like, if a guy is having a big problem with alcohol, or like you said, the guy who leads your peer support group does therapy outside, is there a path for getting help if it's needed, or if you guys recognize someone needs it?
Ocean City, in and of itself, is a lot more progressive in that aspect compared to I think other agencies. We do a good job. Our command staff, for the most part, is pretty on top of who needs what and things of that nature, which I think is unique. There's a lot of agencies that I don't think can necessarily say that. Now, of course, there's good and bad, and I'm sure I'll have some of my peers watch this, and they might have different opinions, and that's completely
Yeah.
fine. What I've seen from our command staff is when you need help, if you express that, they're more than willing to help you get that help, and I think that's really really important. And I'll quote one of my mentors who's not with my police agency, but he's with another agency in Maryland, and he's a police chief, and he always said to me that if an officer came to him and said, "Hey, I need help," and handed him the gun, he would be sure that he would fight for that guy's job, and he would be sure he could get that gun back to that cop. But if he had to take the gun from the cop, that's where he had issues.
Right.
So self-awareness plays a big part too. That if you have the mental fortitude to say, "Listen, I can't have my guns at home right now. I'm going through it. I need help," and you come to your command staff with that, they're going to help you out. It puts them in a harder position, as we all know, understandably so, if they have to come in and take the guns and say you need help.
Right.
it
Right.
it's two different sides. So again, self-awareness is a big aspect of it, but I've really found that if I were to go and I were to say, "Hey, I need some help," and our peer support members are not bound to tell our command staff members, and I think that's really important. I can go to them and they will set me up with a therapist and will never inform my command staff. Now if the therapist thinks, all right, you shouldn't be going to work every day with a gun,
Yeah.
the therapist will then take the proper means,
Yeah.
but that
It's
avenue is
important.
still there.
And it tells you too, I bet that gets messy because,
Mm-hmm.
I used to work at the VA, Ben, and, tons of overlay here where, like, if we had to put a guy on an involuntary hold, they would be like, wait, that could impact blank, blank, blank. Sucks, man. It sucks. I
Yeah,
mean, it's a unique position, and it shows you why maybe some men still really struggle to ask for help. They don't
absolutely.
want that preconceived notion. They don't want it on their record. They don't want to impair their ability to own a gun, all that kind of stuff. So it's really serious. So, Ben, we're not going to shy away from, the conversation around the public perception of police. And, I asked you to come on in particular because I know you'll be a really good voice for this. So I'm curious, like, are you guys trained to talk about this stuff? Are you trained with how to talk to civilians when they're telling you to fuck off or whatever they do? Like, what's it like?
Yeah. So of course, in the police academy, everyone's seen the videos of drill instructors. So drill instructors are there to get your heart rate up, get your blood pressure going, to see how you're going to react. What we're trying to do is almost make you more calloused, which on its forefront probably doesn't sound the best, but you have to understand that we need to be a certain amount of callous in order to get the job done. And when you're sitting on the side of the street and someone's swearing at you or spitting in your face, you have to be able to handle it. Now, things are changing. It's not like it used to be. You would hear stories back in the day where you weren't mouthing off to police officers. That was not a thing. And if you
Mm-hmm.
did, it was a lesson swiftly learned. That's not the case anymore. I will drive down the street and someone will swear at me as I drive down, and that's just the way it is now. The biggest coping mechanism for myself and how I handle it might not be the same as someone else. I wave and I ask them, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What was that?" I've found that when you actually confront someone on it, they're thrown because they're used to. Now, we're very unique in Ocean City, but you go to these bigger cities, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC, where a lot of our tourists come from, and they can do that to their police officers and they just keep on driving. It really throws them for a loop when that cop car slams its brakes and I turn right out and I say, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What was that? You said what to me? Why are you starting off like this?" And it kind
Mm,
of puts them in perspective. We're like, huh, okay. And I think
yeah.
that's really, 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 really important. And then there's the other side of it where I can tell when I stop the car if the person doesn't like the police or not.
Right.
You can just tell off of a vibe, and that sometimes gets frustrating because I don't know them.
Which is so important, right? That's exactly the whole point here is, like, police medicine, law, finance. There's bad actors in
Yeah,
all of them.
absolutely.
And I think that, police is the one field where it's become really, really generalized out there. And so to
Yeah.
ask people like, what did I do? Like, you don't know
Yeah.
me. And the same, like, I don't know you. I remember you
Mhm.
telling me that you try to diffuse situations right from the beginning when you're showing up on a call with the way you
Mhm.
introduce yourself.
Yeah, I often will just say, "Hey, my name's Ben. I'm a police officer," and people will make fun of me for it because it's every single time my camera activates and it's, "Hey, I'm Ben. I'm a police officer. What's going on?"
Mhm.
And to me, it doesn't matter if they want to figure out my name, they're going to figure out my name. Now, there's certain times where I want to put someone in their place, and it is no, I am PFC Panitch, and you'll address me as such. And there's a time and place for that.
Sure.
But for the most part, if I can come in and if someone wants to call me Ben and that makes them feel more comfortable and I can get through the call faster and we all work together, who cares at the end of the day, right? So I
Mhm.
have no issue with just being Ben. And again, I go home, I take the uniform off, and although I'm always a police officer, and yes, you never fully turn it off, I'm just a guy. I'm a guy that has other hobbies, that has a family, and I think that's really hard for people to realize when they see you in uniform is they see this government figure. Really, really difficult for them to try and see past that uniform. And that's what you have to do. You have to be able to relate and show them, listen, man, I'm just a guy. This is just
Can
a
you
job, and this is what I'm doing.
Right. We really, I mean, obviously highlighting the human element of
Mhm.
police work. Do you have like a call you can remember that started out rocky and really ended up in a more beautiful moment?
So I wouldn't say this one necessarily was rocky from the get go, but it's one that's really stuck with me. I'm one of our Spanish translators. And obviously, in today's day and age, there's a lot of hot topic with illegal immigration, things of that nature. And being one of the translators, I deal with a lot of it. For me, it's tough. And opinions are obviously my own opinions, and they don't reflect the agency or anything like that. But I've met a lot of great people that don't have papers to be in the United States. I've met some bad apples as well, just as we talked about. But there's a specific call where there's a woman, undocumented, had her child in the car, uninsured, unregistered, no license. She'd never dealt with a police officer that spoke Spanish.
Mm.
And the fear in her eyes of thinking she's going to be taken away from her child and she's not going to know what's going on. And I was able to bridge that gap. And by the time the call ended, I drove them back to their home, both of them, and she's crying in my back seat. And I will never forget that. And she was just so thankful that she had someone that could try to understand. And I always ask people on calls for service that don't have papers to say, how'd you get here? Tell me the story. Because I want to hear, because the triumphs of how people get to the United States are some of the most amazing stories I've ever been told of what they really went through. And I think that humanizes that aspect as well. You know, we talk about humanizing police. Well, I'm humanizing the illegal immigrant at that point. And
Yeah.
it's clicking in my own head of this is tough. And I always ask them, you still have family in the country that you come from? And I've yet to hear an answer where they say no. Every
Of
single
course.
time the answer is, yeah, my mom is there. My dad is there. I send them money. My
Mhm.
children are there. And I can't even imagine. It's hard for me to get down to Savannah, Georgia to visit my parents. All I have to do is book a flight and I can go. But I think that's difficult. For these people, it's a whole nother level. Those calls for service for me are so important that I can try and bridge that gap and just understand. And again, I always tell people, I start off and the Spanish listeners might understand. I say, soy la migra. I'm not immigration. I'm not here to be immigration. That's not my purpose here. Now,
Yeah.
immigration in Maryland, they do work with us, and we have immigration offices out here, and I recognize that aspect. But that's not my job. I'm here for this call for service. That's that. I will document as such, and then the feds take it from there. And that's not my baby.
You're not required to like report or anything. I was wondering.
So we are in certain aspects. So when arrests are made, things of that nature, we do contact immigration, and that's part of it. And that's a decision that is made on a government level. And again, I think that's hard for people to realize too. My own opinions don't play at work. I can't have opinions at work. I can't have political opinions. I can't have personal opinions. I'm there. The law is what the law is. There might be some gray area with the law that I have some discretion with, but I don't write the law. I'm simply there to enforce it. But that doesn't mean the way I enforce it can't be with a smile on my face and trying to understand the person. I always try to end, even when I give someone a citation or I place them under arrest, them saying thank you and vice versa. And I'll never forget, there was one call for service. I'm driving next to a car, and there was a guy that was locked up in the back seat in a car next to me of another police car. And he, I guess, told the officer in the front, he was like, "Oh, yo, that cop over there, that's Ben. He's next to us. He's a cool guy." And I'd locked the guy up before. And
Yeah.
it's situations like that where that's where I really try to be is the cop that, when I leave the booking facility, I always say, best of luck, sir or ma'am.
Do you watch or have you watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
I have.
This guy was Doug Judy, Craig
Okay.
Robinson, and you're the Jake Peralta, Andy
Yes.
Samberg,
Yep.
obviously. So
Yeah.
that's your Doug Judy. You guys are destined
Yep.
to be best friends and ride off into the sunset. So, what's one common misconception about police officers that you'd like to address?
I mean, we'll put it out there, right? We're all racist.
Mm,
That plays a huge aspect in people's opinions of us. And I think it's really, really difficult. And I often talk about it, and we've talked about it on, just a personal level of how socioeconomic factors play a big part in it. And I think that once people can understand those aspects, it helps them better understand us, right? Crime goes along with socioeconomic factors. You don't necessarily see poor people committing white collar crimes, but you see poor people committing robberies, burglaries, assaults. They're drinking more. There's all these other factors that have nothing to do with race, but play into crime. And then you break down the socioeconomic factors. That's where then race comes in. You know what? Races have more poor people, have more people in certain areas of the country where crime rates are higher. Of course, you're going to have more police contacts where you have more crime. And all these other things then start getting compounded on these factors. And
sure.
it's really, really difficult that, we don't come up with this, but I am there to do my job and I have to do my job. And I always try to explain that to people. And when they look at me with hate, I always try to say, listen, the way you're looking at me is the way you don't want me looking at you. You're
Mm,
saying I'm racist. You're saying I stopped you because XYZ, and you hate me, but you don't know me, just like I don't know you. And trying to remind them of that aspect, kind of chuckle when I stop a car for speeding or for doing something improper on the roadway and they've got window tint. And when I walk up, they say, you stopped me because I'm blank. I couldn't see into the car, right? And it's really, really
that's why
difficult.
you've got the tint, man. I
It's
like, come
like,
on.
yeah. And I always try to tell people, like, dude, I couldn't see your race if I wanted to. You
Yeah.
got window tint, or you were going so fast. I wasn't looking at who was driving, and just trying
That's
to explain that is important.
It takes a lot of strength on your part, Ben, because what's happening there is obviously those people are scared. And so they're
Absolutely.
projecting their fear onto you. You know, you're racist. You did this, because of obviously their lived experiences and their fear in
Mm-hmm.
the moment. How do you hold that empathy,
Yep.
even when that person is unfortunately like emotionally greenlighting you to get pissed?
I think it's important for us to recognize that every encounter we have shapes that person's perception of the police, right? We are very, very proactive in Ocean City. You're going to come into contact with a police officer in Ocean City, whether it's a good contact, a bad contact, or indifferent. You're going to see one of us, you're going to talk to one of us. It's just the way it is. And that's how we like to police. We want our tourists to see us, to know that we're there, and that helps us with our crime rates, of course. So it's important for us to constantly remind people as we train them and as they come here of some of these people have never had contact with the police. They've seen it on TV. That's what they see. You're going to be their first contact. How that contact goes is their impression for the rest of their lives. Now, I come into contact with people that have already had contacts, whether it be in a bigger city or their small town, wherever it may be, and they have
Sure.
this impression. It is so difficult to try and break down that impression. All you
Yeah.
can do is just stay even keeled, right? You have to stay calm. You have to have that conversation and you almost just have to laugh it off, right? Because if you
Yeah.
start taking it personally, where, wow, this guy really does hate me, at the end of the day, does it really matter if the person likes me or not? No. But if I can do my best to try and change that person's perspective, that's all that matters. So if I can continue on that call for service, listen, this is who I am, this is what you did, this is why we're here, it's just, this is what we got to do. Maybe at the end of the day, they'll say, all right, that wasn't so bad. I had a
Yeah.
traffic stop last night where the last thing the guy said was, he was like, oh, you're a chill cop. And it was just a conversation with me, right? I'm sure that gentleman had encounters with police officers that didn't go like that. And it was important that then now he sees this other side that we can have a conversation with a cop and that's all right. And that's normal. And I think that's really, really important as well.
Funny for that guy who it's all relative, right? Because you could be a chill cop, but jumping out of airplanes, you are not a chill dude. And he just doesn't know you all that well like I do. So,
Yeah.
Ben, I'm interested as we look ahead, like what's one thing you hope for in the future regarding the relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve?
Things with police are always on a pendulum, right? They go back and forth with time. Now, I think we've had a lengthy period of time where the pendulum has kind of been over here with people have this impression of us and they don't like us and they think we're all out to get people. And that's really not the case. It's important that we continue as police officers to try and fight that. Yes, we can still go out there, be hard on crime, and make sure that we're doing our best to keep everyone safe, but we can do it in a way that can continue to try and swing that pendulum back. And it's a really, really difficult thing to do, right?
Sure.
When did people in America love the police officers the most in recent times? 9/11.
9/11.
It takes a big event sometimes to show people these cops and firefighters are going to run into that burning building. And in normal, American fashion, we forget, right?
Yeah.
And then we see this next thing on the media, and it's really, really difficult because what sells right now is painting police officers in a bad light.
Controversy.
Cameras just like this are just showing one thing. You can't see what's going on in this side of the room. You can't see my thoughts. You can't see what I'm doing underneath the camera, anything like that. And that's really, really important to remember. As time continues, we need to continue to remind each other that we have to be patient. We have to let facts get out. We have to have these conversations and
For
be
sure.
open to it. And it goes two ways. I need my partners to be willing to have these conversations with people too.
Yeah.
And that needs to be okay. But I also
Yeah.
need society to be okay with having a conversation with me. I need people that are going to call me and say, hey, cousin Boo Boo, I disagree with this. And I can say, listen, I read the actual police report. I saw this on the news. I saw this body cam. What you didn't see was just prior to this, that guy was, spat in the cop's face. A police officer getting angry when someone spits in your face. Anyone will get angry.
Yeah.
All those other factors. And as time continues, we as Americans specifically just need to be open for those conversations. Hopefully in due time, we'll get back to at least a little bit more. I think we've gotten to a point where it's going to be hard to try and get that pendulum all the way back.
Yeah.
People wanted body cameras and they want to film everything. What's tough is people want the police to do the job they do, but in reality, they don't want to see the job we're doing. And now they're starting to see it. Crime is not pretty. Enforcing crime isn't always pretty. People are sometimes bad people. When you see what actually goes into enforcing laws with sometimes bad people, it makes people uncomfortable. And I get that. But people need to be open to have that conversation. As long as we're all open to have that conversation, as we move forward, we're going to understand each other's perspectives and we're going to start to slowly swing that pendulum back. And that's all we can hope for. And that's all I can hope for as I look down, 20 more years of this career and trying to stay as positive as I can.
And it's important, Ben, because I don't think it would be all that difficult, as I don't feel most of these mental health based conversations would be. You're a police officer. The vast majority of the situations you deal with are people at their worst in terms of their behavior. So you're going to get biased. And it's important that the police officers obviously be educated, cared for, and taken care of in a way that doesn't lead to them being, you talked about calloused, but I mean like jaded and angry at society, because then you end up with, really bad actors. But like, put yourself in the shoes of, as he said, my dear officer cousin Boo Boo, officer of the year, no less. We're so proud. If this dude spends his shifts seeing people pissed at him, seeing people doing crime, then it's hard not to imagine people as, criminals. So let's lighten the mood. Ben, I want to do a little bit of rapid fire fun questions to end the show so we can hear some fun stuff. So we didn't talk much about you being in Ocean City. For those of you who aren't aware, that's like a Jersey boardwalk, kind of place.
We're not Jersey, but
it's not Jersey, but people have seen Jersey Shore, so it's probably the most comparable place I could explain. What's your most unusual situation you've had to handle that's specific to Ocean City?
It's different. We've had planes land in the ocean. That's been a thing. We're very unique in the fact that we're actually starting to host concerts now, which is awesome. I like when we're busy. I like when we have big events, and we're hosting concerts with 40 to 60,000 people. As I would say a small agency. We're a medium-sized agency. I'll say that. We've got 135 sworn. That's a lot of people for 135 guys, and trying to do that. And I think that's so unique. And I'm really, really fortunate to be a part of our drone program. So at these concerts, I get the best view, right? Again, it's the two sides. I'm scanning the rooftops of these, high-rise hotels, ensuring that there's no one that wants any bad intent. But at the same time, I'm listening to some of my favorite bands rock out, right? And it's being able to do both at the same time, which is so unique to Ocean City. And I think the biggest thing that is unique is wintertime, right? Wintertime in an ocean resort town. Not going to be that busy, right?
Yeah.
But for us, that's where we get our crazy calls. And so you have to be able to stay on edge because you don't want to be lackadaisical and get taken advantage of. You're used to nothing happening for 9 hours of your shift, and then boom, the tones drop on the radio, and it's time to go to work, right? That's super, super unique to Ocean City itself and its environment. Of course, our calls for service are going to vary because for us, you talk about lowering crime levels in a big city. They see that corner that they deal with, and that's a problem corner, right? For us, it changes every Saturday or Sunday as new families and new people come into town.
Yeah.
We've got to continually rotate, be on our feet of understanding, who's who, where are they coming from, what are they doing, where are they going, and trying to stay on top of that. And that's, for me, really fun. I like the fact that everything changes every week, right?
Yeah.
Makes it unique. I don't get the whole, I've arrested this guy 15 times. We certainly have that, but it's not as common as other places. And that's so, so unique to Ocean City. And what I really find fun.
Just thinking about this, what's the strangest item you've ever had to confiscate?
I will put it like this. People travel with everything they want to use on vacations. And sometimes you come into contact with things or items that I am very, very thankful I have gloves on. Personal items that people like to enjoy on vacation.
PG-13 rated show, Ben. You can come out and
Police officers
say,
come into contact with sometimes some people like to travel with toys that they utilize on themselves. And nothing throws you off more than searching a car thinking, I'm going to find something good here. And you look under the seat and it's a sex toy. It
yeah,
really, really throws you for a loop.
why would you need to confiscate a dildo? Is it because somebody tries to use it as a weapon?
I can assure you we did not confiscate any of those that I've come into contact with. Sometimes it's inadvertent. Sometimes people have them in their purses or they will have them in their suitcase. And you're
I
thinking, all
mean,
right, I'm going to find a gun here. And you don't
girls
find a
got
gun.
needs, girls got
Hey,
needs.
it is what it is, right?
Okay, how often does somebody try to bribe you?
Bribe is I think more rare than we'd think.
Yeah.
Flirt all the time.
I mean, look at this
Yeah.
guy. Look at
I
him.
mean, come on. It's the family genes, right? That I would say happens at least once a shift where you walk up to a car and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and it's like, "Listen, you're good. Nope, I'm not dealing with this right
You
now."
get all awkward like that
And,
and stop doing your job
and
when they give you the big
truthfully,
eyes.
I tell people nothing stops someone from flirting with me as fast as when they're like, "Oh, you're really cute," and I say, "Yeah, my mom thinks so too." They can't continue flirting with me when I brought my mother into it, right?
No.
They're
Well, that's the
uncomfortable.
most classic Jewish boy flirting
I,
line ever. Like if
yeah,
you're
right.
talking to a Jewish girl and you say, I talk to my mom every day,
Absolutely.
that's she's gonna lay it on thick, man.
Golden.
She's ready to take you home.
Golden. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I do.
But have you ever been bribed? I mean, I'd imagine it's rare. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I have been offered money to not do my job, and truthfully, I laugh
Yeah,
because I
I would
I don't know
imagine.
I don't know if people think I can just log into the body camera and delete things or turn it off. That's not how it works.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I find it comical when people are like, no, just like, take this money. Dude, you're literally staring right at a camera right now that all my bosses can watch. It's FOIA-able, and I've got morals. I
Yeah.
I always find that comical that people will still try it, and to me, they just look silly on camera, And so you just got to laugh and be like, did you really just do that?
Desperate times, desperate measures,
Hey,
man. So
yeah,
so Ben, I want to wrap and thank you so much for your time. This was so
I
much
appreciate
fun.
it.
I know
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
gonna
glad
go
it's open to this.
run and tell your mom how proud I am of you and hope
I
she is
appreciate it.
too. So let's just finish off. We've certainly have listeners, Ben, who hold strong opinions or have had negative experiences with law enforcement. What's the message you'd want them to hear?
Reach out, have a conversation, right? You see a cop sitting on the corner, you got to remember, we're human too. We can have bad days. There might be a day that I'm not the friendliest guy, right? You don't know what I'm going through that day either, and I still have to do my job. I think everyone can relate to the fact that sometimes you have to put it bluntly, a shitty day at work, right?
Yeah, sure.
And you inadvertently take that out on other people. Now it's really important that we do our best not to, but it's going to happen. Where I'm going to stop a car, I'm having a bad day, and I'm just not going to have it. And it is, I'm PFC Panitch. This is what I need. You ran that red light. That's the bottom line. And I'm not going to have a conversation with that person.
Yeah.
That happens, right? We're all human. Being able to understand that perspective and understand the other side, right? If I'm trying to have a conversation with you, it's okay. You don't have to sit there with, your phone right in my face trying to tantalize me to do
Uh,
something. You can just have a conversation,
yeah.
right? If you're curious what's going on at this scene back there, just ask. There's going to be one of two answers. I can't say, or yeah, this is what we're going through. This is what it is. And that's going to be the end of it. And if you have questions, ask. It's okay. I think most police officers want to be able to have that conversation. No one signs up for this job to not help people, right? It's why we do it. We want to have good relationships with people. We want to be able to help when we want to help. And I think that's really important. And again, to your listeners, reach out. Anyone can reach out to me and have a conversation. And there's hundreds of thousands of other police officers that feel the same exact way. And you will be surprised by what you find by just having a conversation with an
That's
officer.
awesome. And you gave us really a platform today to have a really, really good conversation, Ben. And I knew you coming on here would show us that things that have been turned into black and white issues in this country are seriously much more gray than all that.
Absolutely.
And thanks for helping us shine a light on that. And Ben,
Yep.
you know we do the Bromotions Hall of Fame to end
Uh,
each episode. And this week, just for you to know, we're going to come back after the break to acknowledge a very famous police officer slash good guy slash icon, Shaq.
yes, he is indeed a police officer. And I love that aspect.
All right. We'll see y'all after the break. Thanks again, Ben.
Yep. Thank you.
Welcome back for the Bromotions Hall of Fame, y'all, where we're honoring heroes all the time, not just in this month of May. Today, we're inducting a larger-than-life figure who's not only dominated on the basketball court, but also shown a real serious dedication to law enforcement and recognizing those guys like we're doing today, and an even bigger heart off the court, man, a savvy business mogul, an advertising icon, a force on TNT's basketball coverage, and that is the one and only Shaquille O'Neal, a man so great he only needs one syllable to be recognized. So, Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972 in Newark, New Jersey. Raised by his mother, Lucille O'Neal, and stepfather, Philip Harrison, who was a sergeant in the U.S. Army, early exposure to service is likely what instilled him a deep respect for those who wear the badge. Even in his early teens, Shaq was experiencing significant growth spurts, and so while quickly towering over his peers, interestingly, you'd think like, oh, he's just gigantic. He's always been dominant at basketball. When really that isn't the story with Shaq. When his father was stationed on a military base in Germany, he had this massive growth spurt. As a sophomore in high school, he was playing against full-grown adults on the military basketball team. And while he may have been the 7-foot giant we know now, he was really uncoordinated, really unskilled. That team and the coaches there were a big part of making him into the superstar that he is today, because his family moved back to Texas as a junior in high school. And from there, he became the #1 basketball recruit and went on to LSU, where if you've seen basketball, you know that's where he made all of his money. We know Shaq for his legendary basketball career and his charming personality. Think about all the ads he's been in over the years. The face of Gold Bond, the General Insurance, Papa John's. And it's not just about lending his image, right? He injects his humor and his enthusiasm into those campaigns, what's made him such a recognizable force around the world. What we want to focus on with Shaq today is that he's also maintained a long-standing involvement with law enforcement. Over the years, he's served as a reserve police officer in various cities, including Miami Beach, Golden Beach, Doral, and even the Los Angeles Port Police Department, and he's really embraced it, participating in community events and expressing deep respect for the men and women who put their lives on the line every day. And the generosity doesn't stop there with Shaq. He has consistently used his enormous platform for good through the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation. This is his charitable organization that focuses on creating pathways for underserved youth, providing them with opportunities to reach their full potential. His involvement with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America is another commitment he's done throughout his time in fame. Let's not forget the countless acts of kindness and generosity Shaq often carries out quietly, which we'll see in a little bit. Even more refreshing is in the recent years, as his career wound down, he started his own podcast, The Big Podcast with Shaq. In a lot of his interviews, he's talked about his own personal struggles, complex relationships, his divorce, loneliness that proceeded after, changes he had to make to be a father that he respected, and to show that a man who used to refer to himself as Superman, showing those moments where he is not truly invincible and willing to share those emotional experiences, is what really rounds out Shaq's BHoF resume. I want to give you a glimpse to the inside of Shaq and his commitment to helping others. So we're going to play a clip from a YouTube channel called Random Recaps with Eric Stanley, and showing you some of the things that have made Shaq really known for being a good guy, and some good sound bites from him.
Third one is to open up children's schools, K through 4. There's a school around the corner from my house. I love it. I call it the no problem school. All the stuff we got going on. And I live in deep South Georgia. Well, not South, but south of Atlanta. I ride by the school every day. Black and white kids playing and hugging and kissing. Spanish kids. They're all running around. And they all know me as Uncle Shaq. I'll stop by and I'll play with them. Love that. I want to be something more than Shaq. See, the Shaq guy's going to fade away. Because you got Steph Curry and all these guys stepping up. The Shaq guy will fade away at some point in time. What I've been doing lately is I'll go in stores, I'll look for moms. That remind me of me and my son. So the other day I'm in Best Buy. I ain't buying nothing, I'm just walking around. And I see this mama and her son. She in the layaway section. So I'm here hustling. And she's trying to get some laptops so her babies can go to school. She owe like $1,100. Nice, beautiful sister girl. And I heard her say, okay, I'm gonna bring $300 this week. And she grabbed one of her babies and said, I'm gonna get the laptops in 2 weeks, baby. And she walked out and I said, I got you. She's like, you don't have to do that. I was like, yes, I do, because my mama told me to do it. Just trying to, lift people's spirits, make people happy, and just trying to make the world a better place. I'm out here doing some video. Proud of you guys. Stay out of trouble. Listen to your parents. Respect your elders. You can be anything you want to be. I'm from the same neighborhood y'all from. I grew up just like this, so only you can change this. You can change it through basketball and showing respect to your peers like you did. And I'm a man of my word. But listen, don't ever take money from another stranger, you understand? I'm gonna honor my word, but don't be taking money from people. So I'll be right back.
And that inspires other people to follow suit and help people in our society who need help. You're a young man. Where did you get an idea like that?
Well, I just hate driving down the street and you see a lady with a baby with a little cardboard sign and say, I'm hungry, I'll work for food. I just don't like seeing stuff like that. So I was riding. Thanksgiving was coming up. So I got with my people. I said, I want to feed 200 homeless people. They said, well, 200, how about 300? I said, yeah, 400. 400. But they was like, okay, 300 is fine.
All right, for our younger audience, that's Arsenio Hall, late night talk show host back in the day. And man, skinny Shaq, young Shaq, that was so cool to see. So if y'all have ever heard a reference to woof, 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 that's from the Arsenio Hall show, our Gen Z crowd. So otherwise, wrapping up on Shaq, man, clearly a guy who has had to put the hard work to get in where he's needed to be. Truly a great role model for kids and does all he can do to help honor people who work hard to protect us in the police force, take the time and energy to help connect with others and uplift others and make this world a better place. So Shaq, now that you're in the BroMotions Hall of Fame, I don't think you got to worry about fading away, brother. This shit's forever. We'll be back after the break to do some content recs and wrap up. All right, y'all, if you like what you heard, here's some content recommendations to keep all these important conversations going. So for your bookshelf, I highly recommend Daring Greatly: How the Courage to Be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead by Brené Brown. If you're a mental health nerd at all, you know Brené Brown's name. She's a big, big deal in the field. This book is a fantastic example of her work and an exploration of why vulnerability is so crucial for connection, growth, and overall well-being. Really challenges that tough guy mentality and offers a roadmap for living a more authentic and fulfilling life. TV, if you have never seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine, then stop what you're doing, hard stop, start it from the beginning. That's your next binge. Now, I know it's a comedy, but what this show does well is it depicts a group of law enforcement professionals, the 99th Division of Brooklyn, who beneath the humor genuinely care for and support each other. They show that even in tough times, connection, vulnerability, and leaning on your team is essential. It can be pretty fucking funny too. Love Brooklyn Nine-Nine, one of my all-time favorites. Reminds us that even in serious professions, humanity and connection are vital. And for movie night, I'd suggest Training Day, not just because Denzel and Ethan Hawke are easy on the eyes. This intense film offers a stark look at the pressures and ethical gray areas that law enforcement officers are asked to face. It's fictional, but really can spark important conversations about toughness and how it can be glorified and the potential psychological toll that it can take. So, fellas, let's keep challenging that tough guy myth. Let's keep having these honest conversations, and remember that reaching out, being vulnerable, and supporting each other is what real strength is all about. And hey, as always, if you found today's episode helpful, we want feedback. Hit us up, email, social media, whatever. Please subscribe, share it with your friends who need to hear it, and leave us a review. We appreciate that kind of stuff more than y'all even know. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Remember, it's okay to not be okay. Let's all strive to be kinder and gentler out there. Peace.